And welcome to the SitRep for today, which is the 14th of July, 2022. We're kicking into the second half of the year, getting it done. Welcome. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for watching this. This is where I pour through news stories over the past 24 hours and pull them apart from the perspective of prepping, in particular, probably more focused towards Aussie or New Zealand prepping, but it's not really... not specifically towards those particular parts of the world. Wherever you are watching this, should be some information for you on there. Good morning to you, Coronavirus, on Instagram. So I'm up on Instagram Live. I am on YouTube Live. Obviously, these recordings will stay up, and I am recording this, so it should be put up on streaming services as a podcast pretty soon as well. Once I get the tick of approval from places like Spotify and Apple Podcasts. You can also listen to this there, because at the moment I'm not really utilizing any visuals that much. I will eventually, but if you don't want to look at my face, and I don't actually blame you if you don't, that's fine. You can just listen to my voice. All right, let's jump into it today. Lots of stuff going on. This one came out of a discussion that I was having with someone on Instagram, one of my sources on Instagram. It's very interesting things that are happening over in WA. So for those who don't know what the situation is in Western Australia, it's been a long-standing joke that Western Australia wants to secede from the rest of Australia, go their own way, do their own thing. It was a joke. It's picking up steam. It is actually picking up steam. And as anyone knows who's looked into what the Australian situation was, especially during the lockdowns that we've had over the last 2 years, Western Australia was particularly harsh on their lockdowns. Even the sniff of any sort of coronavirus anywhere, and they went straight into lockdown and remained in lockdown. So they've been segregated from the rest of Australia for quite some time. Difficult to get in and out of that part of Australia. Now, they actually have a large amount of the resources and mining sector within Australia. So they can, if they wanted to, probably financially support themselves. And they don't have a very large population over that part of the country either. So it's an interesting little sort of conundrum that's popping up there. Anyway, it eased off now that the country's opened up again. Now they're asking for their borders to be reclosed. So some prominent WA business types and some politicians have come out and said, hey, foot and mouth disease is springing up in Indonesia, in particular in Bali. We need to close our borders to Bali, which might seem weird to people. It's like, well, why Bali in particular? Now, if you've ever been to Perth, you would actually know the answer to this. Most people from Perth actually consider Bali a suburb of Perth, being that it's probably easier, cheaper, and quicker to get to Bali than it is to get to Sydney from Perth. And so as a result, a lot of people go on holidays. It's a bit of a trope over there in Perth that a lot of people go on holidays and spend at least a couple of weeks every year over in Bali. Anyway, now they're asking for the borders to be shut. At first, people were sort of, yep, whatever, all right, shut the borders. Then a couple other people, prominent people started saying it, businesses started saying it, especially within the meat industry, started saying, hey, look, we need to close our borders to Indonesia and to Bali in particular, foot and mouth disease. It's serious. Then they started asking the regular folk, those brilliant geniuses that are the average Australian, what they want. And apparently, quite a lot of them are saying, yeah, we want to close the borders. So the secession of Westralia seems to be going full steam ahead. But beyond that too, we've actually got Queensland joining in the fray now. So one of the senators from Queensland has said that they want to suspend flights from Bali to prevent spread of foot and mouth disease. So this looks like it's getting a bit of traction here. And this could be something that's happening. We've just opened up as Australians. We've opened up the borders. We're allowing people in and out. Last Wednesday, I think, or it might have even been a couple of days ago, but I'm pretty sure last week sometime, we dropped the need for testing for incoming passengers who are not Australian citizens on the flights to come in, and also drop the need for them to prove that they're vaccinated or not. So, that's a big opening up for Australia. Now it looks like we're going the opposite way. So yeah, we're we're also some of the things that have been written in to various newspapers here, and on Twitter, if you follow this on Twitter, are calling for more involuntary detention of citizens. Now, the comment, which was probably very astutely observed by one of my sources here on Instagram, said, "I guess they have to justify that new 500-bed federal facility in Perth somehow." So Australia went ahead, and I know there was one made in. There's definitely one in Melbourne. There was one in Northern Territory that was quite infamous. There was one in Brisbane, or outside of Brisbane. There was a New South Wales one that was planned. I'm not sure if it was actually built or not. And there was one built in Perth. These are facilities that were built to house people coming into the country in involuntary quarantine. So, these things were built, and then Australia's opened up. They've spent a lot of money on them. And now they're just sitting there doing nothing. Maybe not. Maybe not for much longer. Looks like they're going to throw up the idea, at least, of putting people back into involuntary quarantine coming into the country, especially if they're coming from parts that have some sort of disease that's happening, or some sort of biosecurity issue. Australia is pretty tight on our biosecurity. New Zealand, I would say, is even tighter on their biosecurity, and with good reason. We've been bitten in the arse quite a few times in the past, and there are a number of diseases that still do not exist, or don't exist in the ways that they do in other parts of the world, and we probably want to keep it that way. Extreme measures, though, that's pretty extreme for me. Apparently, in one poll at the moment, there's 81% in favor of closing the border in Western Australia. So, yeah, Regan on YouTube says Twiggy and Gina will be pushing for this. I imagine so. Could be interesting times ahead for Australia. Are we going to see our own little, maybe not civil war, but secession of our country, the splitting of the Federation, the Federated States of Australia? Another little bit of interesting stuff that Australia has just joined here, a global mineral security partnership. So Australia has, for the amount of human beings that we have a disproportionately large amount of minerals and resources within our country, which is one of the reasons why our country is actually so rich and buoyed up, or immune to a lot of the larger economic effects that usually rip through the rest of the world, i.e. what happened in 2008 with the global financial crisis. The impact was lessened on Australians because of this. So we've gone ahead and we've joined now a global mineral security partnership, along with countries like, where are we? United States, Canada, Finland, France, Germany, Japan, the Republic of Korea, Sweden, the United Kingdom, and the European Commission. So again, we're seeing more alliances form up, and we're seeing more picking of the teams that's happening. You'll notice that there's an omission of a certain amount of countries there, or certain names of countries, other countries that do have a lot of minerals, and from an economic standpoint would make sense to ally ourselves with. Countries like Brazil, Russia, perhaps even India and China. But they're on the other side of the fence. They're the people that we're working against. A number of these countries too, I look at and I go, what minerals are you actually adding to this alliance? Japan, Korea. maybe even France and Germany. Finland, yeah, I can see that, definitely. United States, Canada, 100%. UK, European Commission. What exactly are you bringing to the party here? But, these things are above my pay grade. Interesting times, though. More of these alliances that we're seeing coming about. Quite interesting to me this morning. Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka's still on a downward path. It's looking bad over there, and it's getting worse. More riots, more crackdowns from the government, and now the PM, who is an interim PM, has come in, and they came in. They said, "Hey, look, I'll be interim PM until we form the new government, and then I'm going to stand down." Well, the first thing they did was they got in and they enacted emergency powers, which it's clearly a state of emergency. There's problems going on there. However, it kind of also leads down a path where what we've seen happen over the last couple of years. These states of emergency give the power to these politicians, and they're relatively unlikely to relinquish them when the time comes. So it's very interesting here that they've just thrown out the president. The PM's had to stand down. They've stormed both those residences. A new one's come in and said, "Yep, things are going to change, and I'm just here in the interim, and then I'm going to go away. However, I'm going to take supreme power now. We're in a state of emergency. I'm in charge." And we've seen a massive crackdown from the police forces continue and even increase, according to some reports. So interesting times happening there in Sri Lanka. If I was the PM in Sri Lanka, I'd be walking on eggshells right now. They don't have a good track record there. All right, what else is happening in the world? Italian onion harvests start with lower yield due to drought. So that drought that's been happening in Italy, I've talked about that in the past. It's been quite a severe drought. Well, the first little sign of their crop yields, being onions, doesn't look good. It looks like a pretty low yield. Again, this is just another another factor that I'm looking at from that world food supply. And I like to throw these stories in just to highlight the seriousness of what's going on in the world with our food crisis at the moment. And I'm going to get to something, a really good story on that in a sec. Drought in Texas is so severe that hay is expensive or hard to come by. Sorry, the dogs are just going mental in the background. So if you can hear that, it's just somebody's delivering something out the front. Just ignore it. Just imagine it's crashing waves or something. Hey, I'm doing like a podcast here. Do you mind? Thank you. So yeah, what's happening here is the Texas farmers or the ranchers are having to liquidate their herds very, very quickly. What does that actually mean? They're selling them off most likely at cheaper rates. So that will mean maybe possibly cheaper beef in the area or in the US, maybe. But it could also mean that they're just getting rid of them, just dumping them, as in killing them. We saw this in Australia. We saw this in 2018, 2019. We were coming through probably about 5 years of drought, and it was just before we had those horrific fires. And I remember, like, just before that, hey, seriously, people are watching this on the interwebs. Can you be professional for 10 minutes, please? Oh, God. Never work with animals or children. Sorry, if you thought you were into like watching some sort of professional production here, you're in the wrong place. Go watch some other place, because I ain't it. Anyway, back to the cows here. Yeah, we had this in Australia where people were trying to sell off their cows. People were actually getting out of the business entirely. People were selling up farms. At this point, it is quite horrific. It's quite bad. It took a number of years for things to actually get back on board here in Australia, and people had to build it up. We were lucky for a number of factors there that we could get this going. If there's some other complication that happens here, this could be the death of many farms. I was about to say farmers, which it could be, because you will see things like suicide rates spike in conditions like this, but it could be the death of farms. And it takes a long time for these things to spin back up. So pretty big deal there in the US. Horrific heat wave that's going on, drought conditions, bad stuff for humans, bad stuff for farmers, bad stuff for farms, bad stuff for the animals as well. They heard about the onion yield and are very upset. Yeah, the dogs. Onions are actually poisonous for dogs, so I'm betting they're not upset. Yeah. Again, like as this this story, this came from Ice Age Farmer actually, and it's worthwhile having a quick read or a look at the video on YouTube for it. Rightly put here, says, this is not something that can simply be replanted next year. This is a large number of people's livelihoods being sold away and a lasting blow to food production. Yet another thing that's happening to our food system. Watch out for that. I'm skipping over some stuff here. Actually, we'll talk about this just quickly. Consumer price index in the US, inflation just came in. Now, there was some funky information. If you were tracking this consumer price index stuff in the US, they released some data on this, and then we're like, no, that's wrong, actually. And there was all these stories that came in that were saying they're lying. And then they're like, no, we weren't lying. We just said the wrong thing. Actually, we were lying. Actually, we had to fudge the numbers. Actually, no, that's not right. And all these different people were saying different things. They came out with these numbers that were up over, that was double digit. It was 10 point something. And people freaked out. People like hit the panic button. And so they very quickly came out and said, no, that was a mistake. Forget about that. It's actually 9.1. And I was like, oh, that's convenient. That's very convenient that you brought it back down into those single digits. Good for you. But 9.1 is still pretty horrific as far as CPI goes. So consumer price index increased to 9.1 in June, higher than the anticipated 8.8. And so you can imagine, I think it was 10.6 or something they said. That was pretty like, that put the wind up a lot of people. Anyway, that's marking a 40-year high. Beef prices increased by 8.2%, pork by 9%, chicken by 18.6%. No surprises there, considering all the bird flu and the attacks on the chicken industry that's been happening. Egg prices up 33%, same reason. Milk up 16.4%, coffee up 15.8%. What? Coffee up 15.8%. Oil is up 98.5%. Damn. And gasoline, or oil, as in not cooking oils, that's crude oil, is up 98.5%. That puts gasoline prices up 59.9%. That's a lot. All those things that I named there, every single one of them except for beef prices at 8.2 was underneath the 9.1. And some of them were much, much over that 9.1. So what is dragging that median price down? What's dragging that number down is what I want to know, because they do these calculations and they look at them and go, shit, let's add that thing in. It's cheap. Oh, no one's buying TVs at the moment. Cool. And so people are having sales on TVs end of financial year. Yep, bang. Let's chuck those into the calculations. They've dropped 25%. So that drags the whole thing back down. That's why I always say these CPI are bullshit. Total bullshit. Not total bullshit. They're a rough indicator, but they're always well below what it actually is, what it actually costs a consumer like you at the checkout. And so if you look at this, there should be another way to measure this. There should be, like, they call this isn't even the inflation, right? This is their way of going, oh, here's inflation, but here's what the real person has to pay. We'll call this consumer price index. And then they fudge that one as well. Really, there should be, I don't know what you call it, the no BS consumer inflation index or something like that. What does it actually cost you at the Bowser? What does it actually cost you at the supermarket? What does it actually cost you in rent per month? That's one of the ways they get around this, rent prices. So rent prices are not, they don't actually look at the market and go, okay, what's the median rent price? What they do is they take a survey of a number of what do you call them, landlords, and they say, I know that's not the correct PC term of it anymore, but go fuck yourself, landlords, and they say, hey, how much would you charge for rent if you could charge anything? And people are like, oh, I don't know, $25 a week. You know, they just make up whatever arbitrary number they want, which is almost, I mean, it's always lower than what actual rent is. So that drags these prices down. Anyway, they're lies, all lies. All right. What else is happening in the news? Oh, this is a big one. I was talking about the train strike that is planned within the US at the moment, and we're looking at that California ports issue that's happening right now, that the ports are clogged up. The ports are clogged up in the sea. The ports are clogged up at the port. The ports are clogged up with them getting the stuff out. There's clogs everywhere in the supply chain. And I said there's two things, trains and trucks, that get the stuff out of the ports. And I said that the trains may go on strike. Here's another story that came in. California truckers plan an LA Long Beach work stoppage Wednesday to protest AB5. So they're protesting. Look, don't worry about what that is. The end point of this is that another protest, another strike, another stop work action that's happening here, which is going to exacerbate an already horrific situation for a supply chain. And what is the flow-on effect for that? Increase price, increase inflation to the consumer. Bulge says, spot on, bro. The actual CPI is just under 19%. And I would say that's right. There is actually a website that I pointed to before that you can go and see. And I'm blanking on it right now. If anyone can remember what that website is that I usually talk about, I'll look it up. If you ask me the question, I'll go look it up. What else? All right. So I just want to finish off on this story here. There's a number of other stories, but this one is probably most interesting. This is from Zero Hedge. I'm not going to talk about anything else. Zero Hedge put this story up, and I recommend you go read this. EU warns of waves of migration caused by global food crisis. The European Union has warned of a new wave of migration caused by a global food crisis exacerbated by the war in Ukraine. That's the correct term too. Exacerbated is not created by the war in Ukraine. It's just exacerbated by it. It's yet another factor that increases the magnitude of it. However, there were already a number of extant problems that we had in our system that were causing supply chain issues, and especially around food and food growing issues as well. So they correctly put that there. So what they're basically saying is, hey, European Union, all the European countries, you need to be prepared for refugees leaving Ukraine. For refugees like the refugees we saw leaving Ukraine, which was a mass exodus from Ukraine, obviously. Now that's going to be done again, but on a much larger scale, and not just Ukraine. We're going to see a whole heap of countries. We're going to see Central Asian. We're going to see Middle East. We're going to see North Africa. And if they can push even up from there, Central and maybe even South Africa, start to sweep up and over the Mediterranean into Europe or outwards, into any country that they see as more stable, as more safe, as having more food security or more ability to grow your own food. And that goes from a micro scale all the way up to a macro scale. So even within countries, that's going to happen. This is what we're looking at. We're going to face it here in Australia. Again, we're insulated from the effects. We are insulated from effects in Australia, being that we are an island nation, and even more so in New Zealand. However, as long as borders are open and planes are flying and things like that, then we will start to see an increase in migration in the next months to years. I'm not making any comment on that, whether that's a good or a bad thing. You can make your own mind up about that. But at some point, it's going to actually hit a crisis point where we're going to see humans moving. And the flashpoint for this will be, I believe, North Africa. It will be places like Egypt and probably Libya, maybe even Morocco, Tunisia. We might even go a bit further down. Congo might start getting hit, Zimbabwe, all these sorts of areas, all these countries. I haven't even really talked about the West Coast, but they're going to start moving up. They're going to start sweeping across the Mediterranean and hitting into Spain, into France, into Italy, pushing up through there. This is going to be akin to the migration crisis that we saw in Europe a couple of years ago, but times by 10 at least. It's going to be huge. It's going to be a flood of human beings who are starving to death and desperate and will do desperate, desperate things. So watch that space. That's going to be huge. That is going to be huge. Again, this is something where I like to point this out. There's effects more widespread than just, oh, we don't have enough food. Oh, we're not going to have 3 different brands of cornflakes anymore. People are going to start dying. People are going to start moving. This is going to create much higher levels of violence throughout the world. This is going to create wars. This is going to create conflicts. This is going to create more authoritarian governments, more anti-migration measures and things like that throughout the world. So this is where we're heading. This is what we're moving into. And with floods of migration, historically speaking, you have increases in crime and violence within countries that are migrated to as well. So that's the world that we're looking down the barrel of at the moment this morning. All right, so I was going to keep this under 20 minutes and I'm at 26 and a half minutes, so fail. But that is all I'm going to talk about today. I'll just have this little quote from this report that was put out there. A global hunger crisis might trigger new waves of social protest, internal displacement, and migration to neighboring regions and possibly towards the EU, the report said. So that's exactly what I'm talking about there. That hit prediction, I think that's what we're going to see. And we'll see migration into Australia, into New Zealand, into the US, into UK. That's going to happen. That's what we're looking at the moment. But, we need to think about this from ourselves. If you don't want to become a migrant yourself, and I do not recommend it, especially not if you're getting pushed into places like refugee camps and things like that. I've been to a few of these refugee camps. They are places you do not want to be. Trust me. They are places you do not want your family to be. Please trust me on that. So how do we save ourselves from this kind of fate? Well, we need to be storing our own food up. We need to be storing our own energy, our own water. We need to be growing and creating our own base for these sort of things, our own fundamental base for food. So we need to be gardening. We need to be creating food. We need to be hunting, all this sort of stuff. That's, again, the same recommendation. I should just get on here in the morning and go, here's the hot tip, get out in the garden today. Okay, if you want to listen more about what's happening in the world, stay tuned, but that's my hot tip. All right, so that's it for today, gang. Thanks for joining me again. I really appreciate it. Thanks for all the comments and stuff that are that have been happening. I just dropped a new video on YouTube that I shot where I went out for a bit of a wander at 2 a.m. Go check it out. It's fun times. It's funny. Captain Glitterbeard. At the end of it, you'll understand what I mean if you watch the whole video. But apart from that, if you've got any questions, please send them through. Thank you, Sigilla Wood. Appreciate you being here. And as always, keep prepping. Get out in the garden. Stay safe out there, and Semper Paratus.